The flight that changed everything. The airplane hummed quietly through the evening sky, its cabin bathed in the soft amber glow of overhead lights. Sarah Martinez pressed her face against the small window, watching the patchwork of city lights grow smaller below. Her 7-year-old daughter Emma slept peacefully beside her, curled up with a worn stuffed elephant that had seen better days. Sarah's fingers traced the outline of her wallet in her lap. She knew exactly what was inside without looking: 3 crumpled $20 bills, a handful of quarters, and 2 dimes. $62.20. That was all that stood between her and the complete unknown that waited for them in Seattle. The flight from Phoenix had been a leap of faith, purchased with the last of her savings after the restaurant where she'd worked for 3 years suddenly closed its doors. The manager had handed out final paychecks on a Tuesday afternoon, along with apologies and wishes of good luck. Sarah had stared at that thin envelope, knowing it wouldn't even cover their rent for the month. She opened her wallet now, running her thumb over the worn bills. The coins clinked softly as she counted them again, a ritual she'd repeated dozens of times since boarding. $62.20. In Seattle, her sister had promised her a place to stay and leads on job opportunities. But promises didn't pay for groceries or Emma's school supplies. Emma stirred in her sleep, and Sarah gently brushed a strand of dark hair from her daughter's face. The little girl had accepted the sudden move with the resilience that children somehow possess, treating it like an adventure rather than the desperate escape it really was. Sarah had managed to keep her fears hidden behind smiles and reassurances, but here in the quiet darkness of the airplane, those fears felt overwhelming. "Excuse me," came a gentle voice from across the aisle. Sarah looked up to see a man in his 50s, wearing a crisp navy suit that probably cost more than she used to make in a month. His silver hair was perfectly styled, and his kind eyes held a warmth that surprised her. She'd noticed him when they'd boarded, talking quietly on his phone about quarterly reports and board meetings. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper so as not to wake Emma. "I couldn't help but notice. You seem worried about something." Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. Had her anxiety been that obvious? "Oh, I'm fine," she said automatically, the words every struggling parent learns to say. "Just tired." The man, his name tag from some conference peeked from his jacket pocket, reading, "David Chen, CEO, smiled knowingly. "I'm David," he said simply. "And I recognize that look. I wore it myself many years ago." There was something about his tone, gentle and without judgment, that made Sarah's careful walls begin to crack. "I'm Sarah," she whispered back. "This is Emma, beautiful daughter," David said, glancing at the sleeping child. "Moving somewhere new?" Sarah nodded, her grip tightening on her wallet. "Seattle. Starting over." The words came out more honestly than she'd intended. David was quiet for a moment, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. "You know, I flew this exact route 30 years ago," he said finally. "From Phoenix to Seattle, carrying everything I owned in 2 suitcases and about $50 in my pocket. I was terrified." Sarah studied his face, looking for signs of pity or condescension, but found only understanding. "What happened?" she asked. "I got lucky," David said. "A stranger gave me a chance when I desperately needed one. Changed the entire course of my life." He paused, reaching into his briefcase. "I've spent the last 3 decades trying to pay that forward." Sarah watched as he pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back. "I run a company in Seattle," he explained. "We're always looking for dedicated people. Customer service, administrative work, management training, all with good benefits and room to grow." He handed her the card, and Sarah saw her own reflection in his kind eyes. "I don't know anything about your background," David continued, "but I can tell you're someone who fights for her family. That's the most important qualification there is." Sarah stared at the card, her vision blurring slightly. On the front was printed, "Chen Industries, David Chen, CEO." On the back, he'd written a phone number and the words, "Call Monday, Sarah from Flight 447. I don't know what to say," Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Say you'll call," David said simply. "Say you'll give yourself the chance you deserve." Emma began to wake up, stretching like a small cat. "Mama," she mumbled, blinking in the dim cabin light. "Hi, sweetheart," Sarah said, quickly wiping at her eyes. We'll be landing soon. David smiled at Emma, who gave him a shy wave. You take care of your mama, he told her seriously. She's pretty special. Emma nodded solemnly, as if receiving an important mission. As the plane began its descent into Seattle, Sarah found herself looking out the window with new eyes. The lights below weren't just an unknown city anymore, they were possibilities. Each glowing window represented a life, a story, a chance for something better. The landing gear is coming down, Emma observed, pressing her nose to the window. Yes, it is, Sarah agreed, slipping David's business card carefully into her wallet next to her precious $62.20. But now those meager bills didn't feel like everything she had, they felt like a bridge to something new. David had returned to his papers, giving them privacy, but the warmth of his gesture filled the space around them. As the plane touched down with a gentle bump, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. Are you excited about our new adventure? She asked Emma as they prepared to disembark. Emma nodded enthusiastically. Will there be new friends? I think there will be, Sarah said, thinking of David's kind eyes and the opportunity tucked safely in her wallet. I think there will be all kinds of new beginnings. As they gathered their few belongings and prepared to step into their new life, Sarah made a silent promise. Someday, when she was back on her feet, she would find a way to pass on the kindness she'd received on Flight 447. She would be the stranger who changed someone else's life, just as David Chen had changed hers. The airplane doors opened, and mother and daughter walked forward together into the Seattle night, carrying hope alongside their humble possessions, ready to write the next chapter of their story.